Hello guys, and welcome back to the show. In the last video, we saw how to package and create an image of our Scala application. So what we did was to create an image of the Scala application that we have over here, and when we run the image, it says hello Ben. In today's video, what we're going to do is to learn how to push that image that we created to an Elastic Container Registry, ECR. So usually when you're working for a big company or a startup, what happens is that when we push our changes, we have a CI/CD pipeline that actually runs the test within our application. And then once that is done, there is another step called create Docker image. What we are going to do is that when I come over here and I click on create release and I actually create a release, we are then going to trigger this create Docker image. And this create Docker image, what it will do is that it will build an image of our Scala application, just like we saw in the last tutorial, and then it will connect to AWS and then push the image to an Elastic Container Registry. Let's see how we can do this. Because the aim of this tutorial is to show you how to push an image to an ECR repository through GitHub Actions, I have already gone ahead and created a test case for the Hello World service. So this test case, all it does is that it tests that when we call the say hello method on the Hello World service, we get hello Mao. Now, if I make changes to my code, so rather than Mao, let me change this to Goku, and then I push the changes, you will see that this action is going to trigger the GitHub action to run, because within my GitHub action, I have already set up saying that the name is Hello World Service. When someone pushes to the main branch or raises a pull request to the main branch, what I want to do is that I want to have a job over here, right? And then the first stage is called build. And on this build stage, what I'm saying is that I want it to run on Ubuntu latest. And over here, I'm saying that it should use the actions checkout v4 because I don't want to go ahead and write my own. So I'm using something that already exists. Same for the setup Scala v11. But then I've specified the Java version that I would like to use. And I've created a step called run test. When I call the run test, what it does is that it changes the working directory to ./ECR, which is this directory that I'm in, and then I run SVT test. So let me quickly push this to a branch and then see what happens. You can see that there is a build currently going on, and this build is going to run my test case. And as you can see, it failed because rightly so, I'm expecting hello Goku, but I only specified Goku. But it's not important. What we wanted to do is to verify that when we push our changes, this build was going to trigger. I will make this change to hello Goku, and then when we next push our changes, it should now pass. The first step was built, and this step will only run when we push to the main branch or raise the pull request against the main branch. The next step that we want is that we want to create Docker image. In this create Docker image step, what we want to do is that we want this to only run when we create a release. Again, when we come over here and then we click on create a release and actually create a release, that is when we want this step to get triggered. For this to happen, I have said run on Ubuntu latest if the GitHub event name is equal to release. So when someone clicks on the release button and the event is release, what I'm going to do is to create some steps. The first step that I'm going to do is to add this thing that we have over here, okay? So add a checkout repo, which uses the action checkout v3 version, and to configure AWS credentials using this, but then we can specify the role to assume. So we provided an ARN, and then we can specify which AWS region to use. So I'll go ahead and copy this, and then I'm going to paste this over here. This is the main part that we will be changing, but we will get there very soon. The next step that we need to do is to go back to the GitHub repository that we just saw provided by AWS, and now we need to log in to Amazon ECR private. So when we create an ECR repository in AWS, it can either be private or public. The one that I have created is a private repository, so I'm going to use this. If yours is public, what you can do is that you can use this. So I'll click on this, go back to IntelliJ, and then I'll paste this over here. What I'm going to do now is to change this. I'll change this and then add SBT assembly over here. If you're using Node.js or any other language, what this essentially is the command that we use in Scala to package our application and create a jar. So for Scala, it is SBT assembly. When this runs, as you saw in the last tutorial, you will create a jar file, and then what I'm doing is that I want to build the Docker image. But before you can do this, you need to ensure that the Docker file is within the directory that you want to. For me, the Docker file is within this /ECR directory, which is this /ECR directory, which has got the Docker file. So I have changed my directory to ./ECR, and then over there, I'm saying that SBT assembly, and then this SBT assembly will create a jar file. And all I'm saying is that Docker build, so I'm building the image with this name, okay? And then I'll push the image to this repository. The image tag is the actual tag that you give when you create the release, okay? So if I come over here and I create a release, okay, this is the tag, and that will be the image tag. The next thing that we need to look at is the repository. So this repository is the repository name of the ECR repository, okay? So over here, I've got an AWS account, and then when you click on create repository, you can create a repository and then give it a name, okay? The name that you specify over here is the name that you need to put over here, all right? The last thing that we need to do is to figure out how we can create this ARN. Now, to create the ARN, what you need to do is to go to the Identity and Access Management IAM dashboard. Once you're there, you click on roles, and then what you do is that you click on create role. Under create role, what you can do is to click on web identity. So you click on this one. For the identity provider, you can click over here, and then you can choose token actions githubusercontent.com. You can provide an audience, which is sts amazon aws.com, and the GitHub organization, this is your organization name, or you can use your GitHub username, okay? So you can type in whatever you want to type over here. For me, I'll type in Sarpon Abasimi. The GitHub repository is the repository that you want to give access to. For me, the repository is Scala ES. So I'll go back here, and then I will type in Scala ES, like so. And then the branch is the main, okay? Because I only want to push from the main branch. You can choose whatever that you want, but for me, I want to make this main. I'll click on next, and then you can choose the permission policies. Usually we give the permission, the lowest permission possible, so just the permission that you need in order to push your content or your image to the ECR repository. So you choose whatever permission that you want, and then once you've chosen that, you can click on next. You can give it the role name. So the role name is called GitHub Access. Description, access to AWS, and then as you can see, there is a trust policy over here. As you can see, there is the token actions, GitHub user content, the organization is Scala Abosimi, and then the repository is Scala ES, and the ref, which is the branch, is main. Once you're happy with that, all you need to do is to click on create role. So AWS actually has a nice documentation on how to create role for OIDC, which is what we just did. I'll have the link to this in the video description so you can check it out. Now that we have this sorted out, what we are going to do is to update the GitHub action workflow, and then we are going to give it the right permission settings. As you can see over here, we have ID tokens right. This is required for requesting the JWT, and then there is a content read. This is required for actions checkout. So we are going to do something similar in our GitHub workflow. I'll go back to IntelliJ. Over here, what I'm going to do is to specify the permissions that we just saw. So I've set the ID token to right, and I've set the contents to right. The last step that we need to do is to provide the actual ARN. Now, where do you get the ARN from? To get the ARN, all you need to do is to go back to AWS, go to roles. Under roles, what you're going to do is that you're going to find your GitHub to AWS OICD. Click on that. And then once you click on that, what you're going to find is that you're going to find an ARN over here. Just copy this ARN, go back to your workflow, and then paste it over here. Now set the region to the region where your repository is created, and that is it. So we have successfully created a GitHub workflow. This workflow runs our test and then creates a Docker image. When we click on the release button and then a checkout, it connects to AWS, it logs in into an ECR, it builds our image, so it creates an image of our application, and then it pushes that image to an ECR repository that we have created. I'm going to commit this change and then create an actual release. It is going to fail on mine because I've not specified the ARN. I will do that later on, but I just want to show you that this step is going to get triggered once I click on the release button. So now, as you can see over here, at first we only had the build phase, okay? But now we have the build phase and then the create Docker image. There is a link between the build and the create Docker image. This is because inside of our GitHub action workflow, under the create Docker image, we have needs build, all right? And build is essentially this. So I think I need to change this from a capital B to build, okay? Because I need this build. Essentially, what I'm saying is that only and only if after this is completed, that is when we should get to the create Docker image. So when I click on a release, what is going to happen is that I'm going to run the test, and then once the test is done, it is going to trigger the create Docker image. So I actually forgot that over here, we have added a workflow dispatch. We have push branches main, pull request branches main. We need to add another one called release types, and then we need to specify published. Okay, so this is what we need to do in order to get the release to trigger the workflow. What I'm going to do is to come over here and click on create release, and then choose tag. I'll choose 0.0.1 like so, and then the release title, I would say v0.0.1 like so, and I'll click on generated note, then I'll click on push release like so. Now if I check the actions, as you can see, I have an action being triggered over here. What I'm expecting is for this to finish running and then kick off the create Docker image. If everything within the create Docker image is correct, what should happen is that this should create an image of our application and then push it to the ECR repository as we specify. That is it for the video. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next tutorial.